Running a few minutes late for work, as I reached the lobby entrance, I heard a burst of cheers. Pushing the door open, I saw Tiffany and Blake, the object of her true affection, locked in a passionate kiss, with their friends cheering them on. I calmly watched them finish. Then, under the contemptuous gazes of everyone present, I completed the engagement ceremony with Tiffany. As soon as the ceremony concluded, I called the butler. "Walter," I said, "for the wedding 7 days from now, find me a new bride." In recent years, I had managed the family business quite successfully. Every day, Walter received information about potential brides from various sources. He had watched me grow up since I was a child. Entrusting this matter to him felt both appropriate and reassuring. "Young master," Walter began, "regarding the Vance, there's no need to inform them. Just handle it quietly. Her background or appearance don't matter. As long as she's willing to stand by my side at the wedding 3 days from now." Walter let out a long sigh on the other end of the line before hanging up the phone. Tiffany was the woman I had loved for over a decade. At times, I even felt that this love was more important than my own life. Just recently, to save the Vance from impending bankruptcy, I poured in $300 billion, incurring countless favors. I even chose to propose to Tiffany at a time when all other prominent families were avoiding them. Fearing I would hurt her pride, I had never mentioned these matters to her. I thought my genuine affection would earn me Tiffany's lifelong devotion. But I never imagined that before even stepping into the hall of marriage, I would witness her blatant betrayal. A betrayal that made me feel like the sole fool. "Ethan, who are you having stand by your side at the wedding 7 days from now?" I spun around sharply. Tiffany was standing behind me, a puzzled expression on her face. I composed myself and forced a slight smile. "Of course, with you." Hearing this, Tiffany stepped forward, linked her arm through mine, and smiled. "Humph. I didn't think you'd dare have anyone else by your side. Our estate is recovering, so it's not like we're marrying up to the thorn anymore, right?" I looked at Tiffany, smiled, but said nothing. Tiffany fiddled with a strand of her hair, head bowed, and murmured, "Ethan, I know you saw us when you walked in just now, but I hope you won't take it to heart." Tiffany's words startled me. So she had clearly seen me. Yet she continued to embrace Blake for so long. For some reason, the bitterness in my heart felt even more intense than before. I had a reason for doing that. Blake has liked me for as long as you have. Now we're about to get married. And what's most important is that those $300 billion that brought the company back to life recently were all thanks to Blake's help. Consider that kiss my way of repaying him. As she spoke, Tiffany glanced out of the corner of her eye at Blake, who was not far away. Then she looked up at me, a hint of barely perceptible resentment in her eyes. "Ethan, I don't think you're in any position to blame me for doing that. Let's just call it even and prepare well for the wedding 3 days from now." Before I could reply, she simply walked away. As she left, Blake looked at Tiffany, who had also turned to face him, and a lingering smile crossed his lips. Half a minute later, he too departed in the direction Tiffany had taken. I knew exactly why there was that hint of resentment in Tiffany's eyes. Yet, it was clearly I who had helped her. How could it have twisted into Blake's doing? I pulled out my phone, intending to call Tiffany. But thinking of the wedding 3 days from now, I put the phone back down just as I had picked it up. We were destined to go our separate ways eventually. There was no need to waste any more emotion. Dad and Mom had been traveling abroad with Lucy. Naturally, they weren't aware of the decision Walter and I had made. So, first thing the next morning, they called from overseas. They insisted repeatedly that I make a formal visit to the Vance today. They had even arranged the time with Arthur and Eleanor. Knowing that these pleasantries still needed to be observed, I quickly showered, changed, and left with the gifts. The estate, usually so lifeless these days, was now bustling with renewed vigor. As soon as I reached the courtyard gate, I heard bursts of laughter from inside the house. "Blake, the Vance's survival this time is all thanks to you. Our son-in-law is all show and no substance. But you should understand your uncle's predicament. After all, that marriage alliance was settled a long time ago. If I were to break the engagement now, Tiffany would become the laughingstock of the elite social circle. Alas, what a pity." Arthur's words struck me like a nail, pinning me to the spot. Soon, Blake's voice echoed again. "Uncle, don't worry. It's enough that Tiffany and I have each other in our hearts. Tiffany and I have also discussed it. Her marriage to that miser will help me extract more confidential information about Thorn. I believe that one day, the Hayes and the Vance will make the Thorn disappear from Metropolis. Then and I can be together forever. That's right, Dad. Don't worry. Ethan, that fool, has absolutely no guard up against me. If things go quickly, this whole thing could be settled within half a year. I had originally thought Tiffany was truly just deluded by Blake. I had even thought on the way here that perhaps that kiss was Blake's way of morally coercing her. But it wasn't until this moment that I truly understood. The woman I had loved for over a decade had been constantly plotting to push me into the abyss. A cold sweat broke out on my back at the thought. I hadn't even noticed when all the gifts in my hands had fallen to the ground. The sound of the gifts dropping startled Brenda, a maid from the Vance. Mr. Ethan is here. Please come in quickly. The master and mistress are waiting. Brenda's words brought the lively living room to an instant silence. When I entered the house, Arthur's smile at Blake had not yet faded. Tiffany seemed momentarily embarrassed. She quickly stepped forward, took the gifts from my hands, turned to Arthur, and said, "Dad, Mom, look. Ethan brought all the things you like this time." Then she turned to me, her voice much softer. "Look at you. Why didn't you tell me you were coming in advance? I would have met you at the door. The weather's been cool lately, and you don't even bother to put on more clothes. Look at your hands, they're so cold. It makes my heart ache." This kind of tender care was typical of Tiffany. In the past, I would often be completely captivated by such meticulous attention. But now, recalling the dark and treacherous schemes Tiffany had just spoken of, I was no longer moved. I looked past Tiffany, staring at Blake, and for a long moment, I didn't know what to say. Arthur and Eleanor also felt my gaze. Their eyes, when they met mine, grew increasingly evasive. Tiffany, however, pulled me to sit beside her, interlaced our fingers, and whispered, "Dad asked Blake to come over. I told you why the other day, didn't I? You can't be mad, okay? In 2 days, I'll be your wife anyway, so you absolutely can't throw a tantrum with me now." Seeing say this, Blake also stood up, leaned slightly in my direction, and said, "That's right, Ethan. Our family did help Uncle's family with a small favor recently. You wouldn't believe how much effort I put into getting those 300 billion. I insisted on coming today, so don't overthink it." Blake looked at me, his eyes betraying undeniable smugness and contempt. I clenched my back teeth tightly. After a moment of thought, I looked at Blake. "Are you certain you're the one who got those 300 billion? Blake stiffened instantly upon hearing my question. He sat half-perched on the sofa, looking at me in a strange posture. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be? Then tell me, how exactly did you manage to get those 300 billion? I'd like to learn. You're not going to be a miser and refuse to tell me, are you?" The moment I said this, the once lively living room fell into a dead silence. Blake's face slowly turned ugly. His mouth opened and closed several times, but not a single word came out. As his face flushed crimson, Arthur's voice, which had been silent until now, rang out. "Ethan, that's enough. When the Vance faced trouble, it was one thing for you, Tiffany's fiancé, to stand by and do nothing. But as an honored guest here today, if you keep causing a scene, I'll have to ask you to leave." Seeing defend him so strongly, Blake relaxed completely, then looked at me with a sneer. "How I got the money is none of your business. I don't need to explain it to an outsider like you. If you don't have the ability, I can't teach you. If you do have the ability but don't lift a finger, then you're not fit to be called a man." Blake's words suddenly made me want to laugh. I never realized before how good an actor he was. I didn't reply to Blake. Instead, I turned to Tiffany behind me. When saw me looking at her, she first lowered her head, remaining silent. Then, as if making a decision, she looked at me and said, "Ethan, Blake is staying for lunch, and your company is busy, so you should leave early." If I had held even a shred of hope for Tiffany when I asked those questions moments ago, then now, even that last shred was gone. I had hoped she would grasp the deeper meaning behind my questions. Blake, a spoiled heir who had coasted through life since childhood, would never have such capability, even if his life depended on it. Yet believed him implicitly. Ultimately, it wasn't the facts she believed in, but the person. I looked at the few people present who were bowing their heads in silence, and at Blake, who was looking at me with undisguised disdain. I put down what was in my hands, turned, and left. Before I even exited the courtyard gate, I heard Arthur's voice. "Brenda, take all those things out and throw them away. I don't want them here dirtying my eyes." Just as I stepped out of the courtyard gate, I received a phone call from Walter. "Young master, I've found someone. Her background is clean, and she's presentable. Most importantly, she will hold you in her heart." Would you like me to send you some photos to look at? No need. I trust your judgment. Walter's sigh on the other end of the phone grew heavier. After hanging up the phone, I looked up at the sky. Just like on the day of the engagement, it was dark and oppressive, suffocating me. Dad called immediately afterward. He repeatedly asked if the Vance was satisfied with my formal visit today. I casually made up a few lies to appease him. Just before hanging up, Dad suddenly said that he, Mom, and Lucy would all be coming back for my wedding. This caught me by surprise. We had clearly agreed they didn't want to be bound by formalities. But on the other end of the line seemed very determined. I could only agree. Thinking about the big secret I was keeping from them, my already irritated mood grew even more anxious. After entrusting company matters to my assistant, I returned to my home in the suburbs. As soon as I arrived home, the security camera app linked to Tiffany and my shared bedroom issued a human detection alert. I opened the app casually while changing my shoes. The sight that greeted me struck me like lightning. There, on the king-sized bed that Tiffany and I had chosen so carefully, a man and a woman were entwined. Tiffany was even wearing the custom-made wedding dress I had paid a fortune for her abroad. Blake, his back to the camera, looked down at Tiffany beneath him and asked softly, "Tiffany, I just love seeing you in your wedding dress. I love seeing you with me in your bed. Tell me, in a few months, will the child you're carrying be mine or Ethan's? The thought of it is so thrilling." Tiffany, discarding the shyness she usually showed with me, looked at Blake, her eyes twinkling, and replied coyly, "Well, that depends on who's better, you or Ethan. But I have a feeling you might be just a tiny bit better." Then, a series of intimate and suggestive sounds emanated from the phone. I hadn't eaten anything all day, but I still let out a dry heave. Waves of sour bile surged up from my stomach. My legs gave out, and I slumped against the wall, sliding to the floor. Moments later, I got up and took down every photo of Tiffany in the house. I smashed them to pieces. I lost count of how many times I slapped myself in front of the mirror. I, Ethan, had seen enough of humanity's ugliness in the business world over the years. But I never imagined that the woman I had loved for over a decade, beneath that beautiful facade, also harbored such a filthy soul. I hated myself for being so blind. After a cold shower to clear my head, I sent a message to Walter. "Walter, go to Australia and find the best craftsman we couldn't meet last time. Have him create the most extravagant and unique wedding dress for that girl. Also, invite all the prominent families we can to the wedding." Seconds later, I received Walter's reply. Seeing the simple okay, my heart, which had felt scorched and raw, finally found some peace. Originally, Tiffany and I had agreed that for our comfort on the wedding day, we would only invite essential guests and close friends. Even after I decided to replace Tiffany, I still held this thought. After all, it wasn't a glorious affair, and I didn't want too many busybodies watching the spectacle. But now that Tiffany was acting so shamelessly, I saw no need to preserve the Vance's dignity any longer. On the day of the wedding, the makeup artist hired by the Vance for Tiffany had finished her makeup early. But even though it was already bright daylight, there was no news of Ethan. Tiffany stared at the chat screen, which had been empty all day, and began to feel uneasy. Her dad and mom were also ready. Seeing Stille, her dad cursed loudly at home. In the midst of her growing irritation, Tiffany saw Blake's car pull up to the house. Tiffany suddenly felt that Blake was being inconsiderate. It was one thing to be together before, but how could he come to the house on a day like this? Even if Blake had helped her with that matter, in the elite social circle, the haze was still considerably less prominent than the thorn. Thinking this, Tiffany stepped outside, intending to reprimand Blake. But before she could speak, Blake ran up, panting and out of breath, and said, Ethan's wedding has already started. And the bride. She's another girl. The girl Walter found was quite good. Walter had told me her name earlier that morning. Grace. In that anxious situation, her name actually sounded a bit calming. As for her appearance, I had glanced at her when I passed the dressing room. Although her background was very ordinary, her looks were in no way inferior to those girls from prominent families around me. Compared to Tiffany, she was less arrogant but more gentle and graceful. When I arrived at the wedding venue, Walter was already waiting for me by the door. His face showed a hint of uneasiness. "Young master, did you receive the news that the master and madam are coming back? What are we going to do?" I looked at Walter before me and gave a slight tug at the corner of my mouth. "It's fine. I'll take full responsibility." Walter stomped his foot. let out a TSK, shook his head, and went back to work. To be honest, I was also nervous. Soon, everyone from the elite social circle that Walter had invited arrived. Because I needed to avoid Tiffany, the wedding was scheduled to begin earlier than originally planned. This also conveniently avoided the time my parents were scheduled to arrive. The wedding quickly began. Grace, wearing the wedding dress I had specifically commissioned Walter to make, walked towards me with a shy blush. Richard, beside her, looked slightly nervous. For some reason, I felt a pang of sympathy. Having grown up in this circle, such emotions were rarely seen in the eyes of those around me. Involuntarily, I took 2 steps forward. I took Grace's hand from Richard's. Grace seemed surprised by my action. Her already shy face instantly flushed crimson. I had already instructed Walter to invite and entertain Grace's relatives and friends properly. However, a glance around the entire hall revealed no sign of them. I felt confused but could only inquire about it after the wedding. The wedding proceeded smoothly. The vows I had prepared countless times in my heart and in my dreams were now, ironically, spoken to another woman. I felt both sentimental and ironic. Tiffany burst in while Grace and I were toasting the guests. She was wearing the very wedding dress she had worn that day when she was with Blake. Walter looked at Tiffany as she stormed in, and his gaze towards me held a hint of guilt. But I had known all along that Walter wouldn't be able to stop her. Accompanying were Arthur and Eleanor. Even had come along. I instinctively shielded Grace behind me. But it was too late. Tiffany stepped forward, yanked Grace out from behind me, and slapped Grace across the face, raging, "Who are you, you worthless woman? How dare you try to steal my man, Tiffany? Go ask around Metropolis if anyone so much as looks at my man, Tiffany's man. I'll make sure their family faces utter ruin. How could you? You knew the risks, yet you still walked straight into the tiger's den?" I had expected Tiffany to show up, but I hadn't anticipated her being so emotional. Grace tried her best to control herself, but tears still fell. Perhaps because it was a day of celebration, Grace quickly wiped away her tears while I wasn't looking. But this only seemed to excite Tiffany more. She raised her arm again towards Grace. However, this time, before her hand could land on Grace, I caught it midair. I stepped forward, blocking Tiffany's path. "Enough. You're the one trying to steal someone else's husband now. Grace is my wife. Who are you?" My stopping her had already surprised her. But these subsequent words pushed Tiffany into hysterics. She violently shook off my grip on her right hand, and like a mad dog, lunged at Grace. Grace instinctively stumbled back a few steps. Her high heels nearly made her fall. As I moved to help Grace, I accidentally bumped into the lunging Tiffany. She lost her balance, and Tiffany tumbled to the floor. Tiffany had always been extremely domineering in the elite social circle. Almost no one present had ever seen her in such a pathetic state. Seeing fall, Blake rushed forward, trying to help her up, but angrily flung off Blake's hand. She looked at me with a pitiable expression, whimpering, "Ethan, help me up, quickly. You know the consequences if I get angry are severe." Sometimes I truly admired Tiffany's mindset. Even at this moment, she still took it for granted that she would always be my exception. I looked coldly at Tiffany, who was still on the floor. I stepped back and pulled Grace into my arms. "Compared to your anger, my wife's anger would have far more severe consequences. You're an adult. You can get up yourself." Tiffany looked at the gazes fixed on her from around the hall. Seeing that I had no intention of helping her up, she stood up in a huff. Then she looked at me, her voice tinged with a new harshness. "Ethan, I see it clearly now. This wedding today is just a way for you to humiliate me, Tiffany, isn't it? I've loved you for over a decade. Why are you doing this to me?" With that, she stood there and began to wail. Seeing behavior, I knew that this mattered today. Even if I wanted to end it quickly, it wouldn't be possible. I scanned the surroundings. Letting out a long sigh inwardly, I then looked at Tiffany. "Tiffany, if you say today's wedding is me humiliating you, then what do you call publicly kissing Blake at our engagement party? And what about you and Blake being intimate in our shared bedroom? What about your entire Vance family conspiring with Blake to bankrupt my Thorn?" At my words, the previously relatively quiet wedding reception hall instantly erupted in an uproar. Tiffany stared at me, frozen in place. Arthur, who had been silent by her side, seeing me reveal those shameful matters, a sinister hatred flashed in his eyes. He stepped forward, pulled Tiffany to his side, and stared intensely at me. "Ethan, you're an animal. Don't you dare slander my daughter. First, let's talk about you secretly marrying another woman behind Tiffany's back. Where did you put the dignity and reputation of our Vance with this act? It was the same when the Vance had trouble. As fiancé, you stood by and did nothing. But he raised those $300 billion for our Vance. That's $300 billion. If he's to marry, she should marry a man like him. Originally, I didn't want to bring up the matter of the $300 billion again. I thought of that money as a way to put a definitive end to this fizzled-out relationship. But today, in front of so many people from the elite social circle, Arthur's repeated insults to the Thorns' moral character were unbearable. Dad had been in business his entire life. His reputation was what he valued most. I couldn't let years of the Thorns' good name be ruined because of one woman. Meetings gaze. I said in a deep voice, you've also been in business your entire life. You understand the principle that everything requires proof. Ordinarily, I, as a junior, shouldn't have to teach you this. You keep claiming Blake helped the Vance fill that $300 billion hole. Do you have any evidence? Those present might not pay much attention to the trivial romantic affairs between young people, but matters concerning business were always to be noted. So they stepped forward, looking at Arthur, and began to speak. That's right, Old, if you're making such claims. You need evidence. We've done business with Old our entire lives. The residence's family values are famously good, so Ethan shouldn't be as you describe, should he? Old, did you personally investigate this yourself? More and more people gathered around. Seeing this, Arthur turned and loudly addressed Blake behind him. Blake, since so many people are here today, why don't you explain how you managed to get those $300 billion for Uncle? Let them see that you, Blake, are also a capable man. When finished speaking, Tiffany also looked at Blake with adoration and expectation. A flicker of barely perceptible panic crossed Blake's eyes. He looked at Arthur and said in a low voice, Uncle, this matter isn't convenient to discuss right now. I'll come to your home another day and explain it properly. If had managed to escape that day at the Vance with cunning words, now, with so many astute individuals present, Blake surely wouldn't be able to get away. Upon hearing Blake's words, the people present laughed and said, Young man, this is your chance to prove yourself. If you seize it, no one in the industry will dare to underestimate you again. That's right, the rumors say you, the Hayes' only son, are worthless. This is the perfect opportunity to clear your name, isn't it? Blake looked around. His hands nervously rubbed the corner of his jacket. Then he suddenly looked at me and said, the people who helped me raise the money aren't here today. It was the Liu family, who deal in timber in Southside, and the Han family, who deal in cotton yarn in Northside. I smiled, watching Blake reel off a string of lies. Blake must have thought I had only invited the prominent families to today's wedding. As for these minor business people, he must have assumed they wouldn't be present. Perhaps this was fate helping me. I looked at the people standing at the back of the crowd and said with a smile, Come forward. Young Blake says you helped him raise $300 billion. Now that the Vance's difficulties are over, whoever he just mentioned, come and demand your money back. The moment I finished speaking, a group of people walked forward from the back of the crowd. Mr. Ethan, we don't even know who that young man, Blake, is. How could we possibly have raised money for him? Exactly. But if Mr. Blake says we raised it, then we raised it. Tell us how much we gave you, and pay it back today. A burst of laughter erupted from the crowd at this. Seeing this, Blake's face instantly turned ashen. Arthur's and Tiffany's faces also progressively darkened. I truly didn't want this farce to continue. So I looked at Tiffany and said coldly, those $300 billion were transferred by me to the Vance's account. I sold the plot of land I had just acquired in Southside, incurring countless favors. I didn't tell you because I was afraid of hurting your pride. But if you, Tiffany, had cared at all, with your connections in the elite social circle, a simple inquiry would have revealed that I was the one behind it. Yet you and your family chose to believe the nonsense of that good-for-nothing standing before you, rather than believing me, someone who loved you for over a decade. Tiffany, this time, we are truly over. You should leave. Before could reply, Walter hurried in from outside. He looked at me and said in a hushed tone, Young master, the master and madam have arrived. Walter's words startled me. Before I could react, I already saw Dad and Mom's figures. Lucy, following behind them, kept winking at me. Dad held a very high position in Metropolis. Seeing arrive, people on both sides retreated, clearing a path for him. Dad looked at me, with no trace of joy in his eyes. Ethan, what exactly is going on? Tiffany was a child Mom and Dad had watched grow up. She had always been good at winning their favor. So, everyone in the family had been quite fond of Tiffany. Before I could reply, Tiffany, looking wronged, walked to Mom's side and said tremulously, "Auntie, today was supposed to be Ethan's and my wedding day. But I got ready early at home, waiting for him to pick me up. And instead, he secretly went ahead with the wedding with this girl from who knows where." Mom looked at Tiffany, who was crying and talking, and a hint of heartache showed in her eyes. She gently stroked Tiffany's hand, comforting her softly. "It's okay, dear. If truly made a mistake in this matter, Auntie will certainly make it right for you." Arthur, who had just been baring his fangs at me, seeing Dad arrive, immediately stepped forward and bowed deeply. He looked at Dad and said with a helpless expression, "Kids really grow up fast nowadays." I just said a few words to Ethan, and he openly defied me in front of everyone. Sigh, I suppose I'm just getting old. Arthur's reputation in the industry had always been mediocre. Dad, of course, knew this. So, upon seeing Arthur's demeanor, Dad's pupils contracted slightly. He merely patted Arthur's shoulder, then looked at me and said sternly, "Ethan, quickly explain everything clearly. If you truly made a mistake, then apologize to Uncle and Tiffany, now." I looked at Dad, feeling a bit awkward. "Dad, I'm afraid those matters might dirty your and Mom's ears. Is this the time to be considering such things?" Dad's voice, resonant as a bell, instantly jolted me awake. I suddenly understood the deeper meaning behind this. My actions of secretly changing the bride behind the Vance's back were indeed inappropriate. If this matter wasn't clearly and emphatically explained today, I feared it would genuinely impact the Thorns' reputation in the elite social circle. I looked at Dad and nodded slightly. Then I walked onto the stage, took the microphone from the host, and said, "The reason I broke off my engagement with the Vance before today's wedding was due to unresolvable grievances. Having been with Tiffany for over a decade, I can honestly say I treated her with a clear conscience. However, she got involved with Blake behind my back, and Arthur was aware of it. They even secretly conspired that after marrying me, she would extract confidential information about Thorne's business secrets, with the intention of completely ruining the Thorne in the business world. I absolutely cannot marry a woman like that. The estate's upbringing forced me to make today's decision." As I stated these facts so solemnly once more, murmurs of discussion periodically rose from below the stage. Dad looked at me and asked in a grave voice, "Ethan, do you have concrete proof for these claims? Otherwise, if your few words ruin Tiffany's and the Vance's reputation, you will only be compounding your offense." Originally, I hadn't wanted to reveal that evidence. After all, it concerned a man's dignity. But now, in this situation, there was no turning back. "I do." With that, I took out my phone and connected it to the large screen behind me. Looking at the nauseating surveillance video from the new shared bedroom, I pressed play. Instantly, Tiffany's and Blake's utterly shameless words filled the quiet wedding reception hall. "Tiffany, tell me, after we were intimate today, will the child you conceive be mine or Ethan's? The thought of it is so thrilling." "Well, that depends on who's better, you or Ethan. But I'd say, you're the best." Hearing those words again, I still felt waves of nausea rising in my stomach. Arthur, who had just been looking smug, saw this and rushed onto the stage like a mad dog, trying to turn off the large screen. But today, this was the Thorns event. Without my word, no one dared to touch anything. Before could even get on stage, he was stopped by the hotel's security guards. Below the stage, Tiffany's face instantly turned pale. Blake, staring at the large screen, had begun to tremble all over. Those shameful words played on a loop. I looked at Tiffany, Arthur, and the crowd below the stage, and asked loudly, Ethan, want to ask everyone here today, was I wrong to break off my engagement with the Vance?" "Ethan, you were not wrong." Dad's voice resonated from below the stage. In an instant, countless voices of support rose from the audience. Seeing this, Arthur stumbled towards Dad and bowed frantically. "Old, why must we make such a scene out of the children's affairs? If this continues, Tiffany might never be able to show her face again." Dad gave Arthur a cold glance. "And when you publicly disrupted my son's wedding, did you consider my son's dignity and reputation?" I coldly watched a panicked Arthur and Tiffany below the stage and continued, "Don't worry, the part that will cut off the Vance's financial path is coming next." With that, I played the recording of what I had heard outside the Vance that day. My purpose in marrying Ethan this time is to extract more confidential information. Then, united with Blake, we will definitely bring down the Thorn. Daughter, You truly are courageous and cunning. If you truly manage to bring down the thorn, you will be the Vance's hero. Then, Dad will definitely take you to the family hall to offer respects to the ancestors and speak of your achievements before them. The recording hadn't even finished playing when Arthur dropped to his knees before Dad, weeping profusely. Old, I failed as a father. My moral character is lacking. I am unworthy of Ethan, unworthy of a family like yours. Now I only beg you to give our Vance a way out. The estate just barely survived. If we face something like this again, we might never recover. Seeing her dad in such a state, Tiffany also ran onto the stage, knelt before me, and said tremulously, Ethan, please, for the sake of our relationship of over a decade, just this once, spare me, okay? If you're willing to let us go, I'll serve slavishly for you for the rest of my life. Please, Ethan, don't do this, okay? I had loved the woman kneeling before me for over a decade, and I had indulged her for just as long. I had always believed we would end up like most loving couples, culminating in marriage. I never imagined it would end like this today. In the past, seeing Tiffany shed even a few tears would break my heart. But now, on the large screen behind me, intimate moments between her and another man were playing. From the phone, her hateful words echoed. I truly had not an ounce of pity left for her. I took a step back, my gaze fixed on Tiffany. This is all on you. You're the one who wouldn't let yourself off the hook. Dad watched all of this unfold, his eyes cold and dispassionate, from below the stage. He then turned to the crowd behind him and declared, regarding the annulment of the engagement with the Vance, I've learned the full story today. I believe my son did the right thing. Given the Vance's moral character, our Thorne family will have no further cooperation with them from this day forward. With that, he turned to me, Ethan, let's leave it at that for today. We'll reschedule the wedding. Any young woman who marries into the Thorne, no matter who she is, will do so with full honor and ceremony. With that, he put his arm around Mom and walked away. Everyone present, upon hearing Dad's declaration, immediately made their allegiances clear. They turned their attention to Arthur and Tiffany, who were kneeling on the ground, and began to openly condemn them. Old, you're truly foolish. Did you not even consider what that Hayes boy could possibly do to help your Vance? By offending the Thorne for the Hayes, you'll likely have no future in Metropolis. Old, we've had decades of friendship, but honestly, after seeing those messages where you and your daughter conspired to scheme against Ethan, we'll never work with you again. It sends chills down my spine. These were still the people who had some connection to the Vance. As for the others who had always looked down on the Vance, when they passed Arthur, they not only remained silent, they even spat at Arthur. 10 minutes later, the wedding reception hall gradually emptied out. Within the vast wedding reception hall, only Grace and I remained, along with Arthur and Tiffany, who were still kneeling on the ground. Eleanor stood in front of Arthur, wiping away tears while lecturing him about his shortcomings. Blake had vanished without a trace long ago. After my sister Lucy saw the guests out for me, she came back, looked at Grace, who was standing in the corner, and said with a smile, "This must be our new sister-in-law. You look absolutely stunning in that wedding dress. You've been through a lot today. Dad said we'll pick another good day and definitely give you and my brother a proper wedding. Come on, let's go home." With that, she gave me a knowing look from the stage and led Grace away. 7 days later, Grace and I held our wedding once more. It was then that I realized she hadn't wanted her relatives to attend because she feared those unsophisticated family members might tarnish the Thorne's reputation, but had built his wealth from the ground up, so the Thorne certainly held no prejudice of disdaining the less fortunate and fawning on the wealthy. So this time, Grace and I returned to her hometown and invited all her relatives to the ceremony. A year later, Grace and I welcomed our first child. Grace was gentle and intelligent, although she didn't understand business matters. She took excellent care of me in our daily life. After a year of practice, she was also perfectly at ease when accompanying me to various social events and banquets. She didn't care for luxury goods, unless meeting guests. She always dressed very simply on a daily basis. Mom and Dad adored her. Even my sister Lucy, whom I could never quite manage, became a perfectly well-behaved girl in front of Grace. For this, I even gave Walter a special generous bonus, thanking him for helping me find such a perfect wife. The estate completely declined after the wedding. Facing enormous compensation from several failed collaborations nearly depleted all of the Vance's assets accumulated over the years. Facing the Vance in such a state, Blake had long since vanished to the sidelines. But no one intended to let the haze off the hook either. 2 years later, the haze also collapsed. When I gathered with friends in the past, I sometimes heard them mention that Tiffany had indeed married Blake and even had children. But what good could possibly come from two fallen families uniting? Blake constantly abused Tiffany, both physically and verbally, while he spent his days addicted to gambling. He even eventually forced Tiffany to entertain guests at bars to earn a living for the family. Whenever these things were mentioned, my friends would always praise Grace in front of me, but in the end, they all said in unison, "We're just one Walter away from a happy life. Quick, have Walter search again and introduce some suitable partners to us, your brothers." Perhaps truly brought me immense good fortune. In the years following our marriage, the Thorns' annual income skyrocketed. When alone, I occasionally reflect on the path I've traveled, truly grateful that, thankfully, Tiffany betrayed me.